Now, speaking of legends, how many of you that are here knew Honoree King? I think a lot of you. But there's also a lot of people here, the students, new faces in the crowd, that did not know him. And Honoree King was really an important part of Cooley and the law department at Case, and his career was really amazing, from being a Nuremberg prosecutor to being Honorary Consul General of Canada to Northeast Ohio, and everything he did in between. We actually have a book now that's dedicated to him that has many of his, well, he did, in his last year of his life, he did a series of lectures, and we have transcribed them. They're sort of his life lessons, and all of the speakers have a copy of this. Anybody else who is interested, we can get you a copy. But I've also passed around this Honoree King International Law Studies Fund form. And what this is we've created a fund to help Cooley, to create an endowment for Cooley and some of the other things that Honoree has built up as part of his legacy. And the fund was started a couple of years ago. I'm the chairman of it. There are people in this room that helped on the committee to raise money. It's now surpassed $65,000, and that's given us enough money in interest payments, because it's an endowment, to now fund Cooley students to go up and do internships in various institutions in Canada, and we're hoping to build on that. So I give this to you if you're interested in helping us build the permanent legacy of Honoree and building up the Canada-U.S. Law Institute. Well, there was also an award established in Honoree's name the year that he passed on. And the first year, we gave it to the Honorable George Voinovich, Mayor of Cleveland, Governor of Ohio, Senator from Ohio. Last year, we were very proud to give the same award to a Canadian, Bill Graham, the former Foreign Minister of Canada, who was here and gave a great acceptance speech. And so this year we have decided, the executive committee, through long discussions, thought that the best person to honor would be Sidney Picker. And you'll hear more about Sidney because Professor Lou Katz, one of Sid's favorite colleagues and oldest friends, is going to do an acceptance speech, because Sid unfortunately is temporarily unable to come up here. But I'm looking straight in the camera. Sid, I know you're watching right now. So we miss you, and your spirit is here with us. But let me read the award that goes to you, Sid. It's the Canada-U.S. Law Institute at Case Western Reserve University School of Law and the University of Western Ontario Faculty of Law presents the Honoree T. King Jr. Award to Professor Sidney Picker Jr., Case Western Reserve University School of Law. Cooley established the Honoree T. King Jr. Award in 2009 to recognize those individuals and entities that capture the spirit of Honoree King, a lifetime advocate for Canada-U.S. relations, the rule of law, and public service. Cooley honors Sidney Picker Jr., Professor Emeritus of Case Western Reserve University School of Law, for founding the Canada-U.S. Law Institute in 1976 and serving as its director and later as chairman of its advisory board. Cooley further honors Professor Picker's lifelong dedication to public service and the rule of international law, from his works as special representative for trade negotiations during the Kennedy round of GATT trade negotiations, to his current work as head of the Russia-U.S. Legal Foundation. We thank Professor Picker for his 4 decades of service to and promotion of Canada-U.S. relations, public service, and the rule of law. Issued this 23rd day of March in the year 2012, signed by Honorable James Blanchard and Honorable James Peterson, the co-chairs of the Executive Committee, we hereby duly give you this award, Sid. And to accept the award, my colleague, Lou Katz.
Thank you. I love this conference. Nowhere in the United States would there be a room of 100 people when the words Smoot-Hawley are mentioned. Everyone but the youngest laughs and nods their heads. I was originally given 15 minutes to accept this award on behalf of my friend Sidney, but that time has been shortened to 6 minutes, which requires that I speak very fast and that I omit some of my favorite stories about Sidney's idiosyncrasies. One I cannot resist is that Sidney mastered the complaint letter. Any airline, corporation, or tradesperson, or dean, who failed to meet Sidney's very high standards for the level of service he expected received an extensive, documented, more often than not, footnoted letter of complaint. And woe betide the corporate president who did not respond, apologizing and offering Sidney a free trip or something similar. For Sidney was nothing if not persistent, and the letters flew back and forth until the corporation surrendered and compensated Sidney for its failing, once for offering nothing more than a bag of peanuts on a 2-hour plane trip. Imagine that today. The letters were so frequent and voluminous that one wag suggested that when Sidney dies, his tombstone should say, quote, "a man of letters," Sidney's pit bull tenacity and his penchant for high standards were traits that he expected of himself as well, and still does, fortunately. He drew from both when founding and nurturing Cooley. It's appropriate that Sidney should be honored today, and I thank you for that. An award from Cooley is especially ironic, as Cooley was a product of Sidney's vision and, above all, his imagination. How nice to get an award from one's own imagination years later. When he joined the law school in 1969, he developed our international law curriculum, even in the face of the know-nothing faction of the faculty, me, who didn't and still doesn't believe in international law. The law school was a funny, insular place in those years. The reason we did not have 2 professors picker on the faculty of this law school for 30 years was that the then dean, a refugee from Harvard, was intent on keeping the faculty all male. And so eventually Professor Jane Picker joined the law faculty of Cleveland State University. An unfortunate loss for this law school. Not only did she appear in the Supreme Court, she won. Sidney broadened the international law curriculum and guided the International Law Journal in its infancy. Sidney also brought Henry King to the law school as an adjunct professor, and then was instrumental in finding a home here at the law school for Henry when he needed such a home. Cooley became an idea after the American Society of International Law twice asked Sidney to put conferences on in 1973 and 74. Sidney chose Canada-US subjects, and Eureka decided there was a need for a permanent law school-based institution focusing on the special relationship between Canada and the United States. Don't wave at me. And make no mistake, it was Sidney who made that decision. He envisioned a platform for the academic examination of legal issues affecting the special relationship between Canada and the United States, one that would provide a fertile foundation for exploiting comparative law opportunities between law schools and the 2 countries. Of course, as everyone who was here at the law school then knows, when Sidney set his mind to something, the process was slow, painstaking, and deliberate. Of course, another way of putting that is that Sidney went about it the right way. His approach could serve as an organizational management handbook for creating any new organization. First, Sidney sought needed seed money. He got $750 from the Canadian Embassy in Washington. And then he played both governments against each other until each had given him $25,000 seed money. Plus, he got nearly $100,000 from the Donner Foundation. He involved the faculty of this law school at every step in the development of the Institute. He headed a faculty committee that interviewed all interested law schools in Ontario to find the best fit. Unfortunately, I was a member of that committee, and we traveled then on every puddle jumper across the lake. Sidney Jacoby, a member of the faculty, and the first Nuremberg prosecutor to be a member of the faculty, who incidentally seemed like such an old man at the time, I think he was 60, knew how much I hated to fly and would lean across me to me during those flights and ask, "Lou, did you feel that bump?" Well, we made all those trips. I learned that Canadian squirrels are black. But Sidney learned a lot and decided that the best fit for a partner school was the University of Western Ontario. And it turned out to be a perfect fit. Sidney was determined to make the Institute binational, and during Sidney's time as the American director of Cooley, all decisions were made by both schools and both directors. Sidney also chose the name, presumptuously at the time, the Canada-U.S. Law Institute, to discourage higher-ranking U.S. law schools from creating a competing institute. In the early years under Sidney's leadership, Cooley involved student exchanges between the University of Western Ontario and CWRU, and substantive faculty exchanges. Justice Dennis O'Connor of the Ontario Supreme Court and I used to visit each other's classes every semester. Dennis then was just back from being governor of Inuit territory, which made him fascinating, of course. We were prompted, all of us here, to do some comparative law teaching. There was nothing more motivational than a Canadian exchange student raising her hand and saying, "We don't do it that way in Canada." The Institute founded the Canada-U.S. Law Journal and the Niagara Moot Court competition. This annual conference, which began before the Institute developed, has become a gem. In 1979, it featured Justice Potter Stewart of the U.S. Supreme Court and Justice Brian Dixon of the Canadian Supreme Court. Picker lost Justice Potter Stewart in downtown Cleveland, if you can imagine. Cooley was a vital part of this law school during those years. But one would be mistaken if he or she thought Cooley defined Sidney Picker. It did not. Most of all, during Sidney's 30-plus years on this faculty, he was a teacher and mentor of law students. Any student who sought Sidney Picker's assistance got it. And that student always became, for that period of time, Sidney's first priority, whether it took 20 minutes or 12 hours. And I don't exaggerate when I say 12 hours. Lastly, let me bring you a message from Professor Picker. He does not think that Cooley should replicate what he did when he was its director. It was created in 1976 to address issues as seen then. He is happy to pass the torch to a new generation to evolve Coolsley, to develop whatever programs are appropriate for more modern times. Sidney prods the 2 law schools and the advisory board to serve as that new generation of caretakers to determine what is essential and appropriate if Coolsley is to survive and remain meaningful. So Sidney thanks you for this award, and we will get it to him somehow in the near future. Thank you.